So the topic is sales tax audits can be devastating, and are you at risk? So what we're really going to drill in on today is let's understand what the current climate is and what some of the challenges are around that complexity that exists in sales tax compliance. Then we're going to present what our value proposition is, give you an example of what those solutions look like, and then we'll wrap it up with a little bit of a discussion as to who we can help, what kinds of industries and businesses we've been successful in working with up to this point. So just a quick starter, you may have seen a sign similar to this in stores that you frequent around town. So the point is, by law, we must do this, right? This is a compliance statutory requirement, but I haven't really ever heard anybody say that they really love dealing with sales tax. It's something that it's a pain, and you just have to kind of get through it. So let's think about where we are, what the current climate looks like. Sales tax is a key source for revenue for the states and for local jurisdictions as well, for that matter. So as we ran into a recession, especially a number of years ago, that revenue plunged quite a bit, resulted in budget deficits for the states. So states have been scrambling, looking really hard to try to figure out a way to increase revenue. And so there's already sales tax laws in place, and one of the things that they said they could do to increase the revenue stream was to improve enforcement. And therefore, there's been a great increase in the number of audits and a lot of changes in the rules and regulations and making it more complex and more challenging, but it's just become a much more risk-prone area, and that's really what it means to you as a business. Sales tax compliance is now a major source of risk for you. And it used to be 5, 6 years ago that you could kind of play an audit roulette game, if you will. You might know that you were not in compliance, but you could just kind of lay low and hope that you didn't get audited, and you could actually skate by to some degree in that regard. Maybe get audited once every 7 to 10 years and pay the piper if you did, and that was actually a reasonable business strategy. But today it's no longer a matter of if you'll get audited, it's just a matter of when, and it's happening with more and more frequency. In the environment that we're in with state legislatures and the local jurisdictions so upside down, audit activity has gone way up. Your chances of getting audited were up 22% year over year last year, and that's on the heels of those kinds of increases the prior several years as well. So your probably odds are 2 or 3 times greater today of being audited than they were just 5 years ago. And the average penalty for those audits now, with penalties and interest and fees and so forth, is hovering around $34,000. And that's not a small amount of money. That can be pretty devastating. It's not something you typically budget for and plan on. And certainly that's an average. We've heard some numbers that are at 6 figures, and that's not uncommon at all. And that can be really challenging for an organization. In some cases, really put you on the ropes. So it's a tough climate out there because every state is facing those budget deficits, and they're really working hard to recover that. I mean, I've seen some instances where state revenue is about 60 or 65% dependent on sales tax revenues, though my guess the average is closer to probably 50%, but some states really heavily rely on sales tax revenue. So they're going after it there, and probably the only position being hired in state government these days, the last few years, has been auditors. We've got several examples here. Idaho hired 48 auditors so far just this year. California is planning on hiring 100 more over the next few years with a particular focus on online sales tax, which we'll talk a little bit more about. State of Washington recently hired a couple of dozen auditors strictly to audit Oregon-based companies doing business in Washington. And so states are sharing information better than ever. One of the results of the information age that we're in is that data can be shared easily, and it's pretty hard to hide and run anymore from the auditor. And so it's become a real challenge. And then on top of that, increasing enforcement activity, there's all kinds of new laws being passed and new regulations being defined that impact this environment as well. The concept of nexus is the legal term out there for a requirement to file and remit taxes in a particular state. That concept of nexus used to be pretty straightforward. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but now they're coining new terms and new approaches, such as what's being called affiliate nexus. This kind of is a web-based term coming from the Amazon affiliate environment you may be familiar with, but it's being applied to all kinds of different environments, such as sales agents and manufacturers, reps, and so forth. So that whole affiliate concept can actually be pretty broadly applied. And we've heard the term now coined called economic nexus, which I guess means that if you do business in a state, you have nexus, whether you ever step foot there or not. And pretty soon it's just going to be, you fly over my airspace and you've created nexus. So it's getting more and more dramatic. We've got more and more customers coming to us telling us that they're just kind of throwing up their hands and just going to get registered in all the states and not play the game anymore. They just want to get registered, do it right, be in compliance, and then automate the process to make that easy to do. So that's a big driver for our business these days. In addition, states are passing laws that kind of redefine what our service is and what's taxable. A lot more services are being taxed. And in this area of digital content and cloud computing and digital downloading of data and so forth, those have typically been exempt or are non-taxable transactions. Those are being gone after now. So already 20 states have passed laws relative to cloud computing and digital content. Again, states are looking at every possible way they can find a new source of revenue using the existing infrastructure of sales tax to do that. And then at a federal level, there are now two bills, one in each House of Congress, to enact what's being called the Main Street Fairness Act or Fairness Law. But basically, it gives a vehicle and the okay for states to now enact laws referencing internet sales, remote sales, coming via the net. So there's some estimates that $20+ billion over the last few years has been missed by those states, and so that's a big number, and they're all salivating, ready to go after those dollars. So it's a constantly changing environment, and unfortunately, all the change is negative to those of you that are in small, medium-sized businesses that are going to have to try to manage this activity. Let's dig in a little bit deeper into the concept of nexus. I mentioned that the states define this as a tangible physical presence, and that's always has meant in the past some obvious things, like if you had an office or a warehouse or physical property of some kind, you had an employee living in a particular state. That was pretty straightforward and made sense that created a physical presence in that state and therefore a requirement to collect and remit those sales taxes. But again, what we're seeing is a real broad application and redefinition of what constitutes nexus. So now you might be attending that state for a trade show or coming in to visit clients several times a year, or to provide training several times a year, or doing service work of some sort on personal property. And again, this affiliate concept, if you have associated businesses there, if you deliver product in your own trucks and then return back out of state, that could have created nexus in some states. So all these rules and laws are being looked at. And these things are not very public, right? They can kind of tend to happen behind the curtain, if you will, not real publicized, as opposed to when rates change, that tends to become a pretty political process. In some cases, even there's votes taken. In Arizona recently, in the heart of the recession, they passed a 3-year sales tax increase of 1% that I think is scheduled to expire here shortly. We'll see if that actually happens, because most taxes never expire, right? They just find a new reason to live. But so all those things are more public and out there in the public consciousness. But some of these rules and regulations are kind of going on in the background. And if you haven't really revisited your nexus footprint and what might be creating nexus, I would recommend that you do that. And we've got actually professional services folks on our team that can help you with that assessment. But I wouldn't rely on information that might be 2 or 3 or 5 years old. I think you'd be really increasing your risk there. Another issue besides the nexus issue is that of situs, another good Latin term, or the location of the transaction. And then therefore what jurisdiction is telling you that you need to collect tax for that transaction. And there are different rules, as we like to do in this country, from state to state. So there are some states that are what are called origin-based, or shipped from orientation, like Arizona, Illinois, and those that we list here on this slide. And so those tend to be a little bit more straightforward and easier to deal with in general, because I'm shipping from a particular city, county, specialty jurisdiction location, and I know that, and I don't move around, so I can establish that in a table, in a system somewhat manually, and get by with that. The challenge is that some of those origin-based states also are what are called home rule states, like again in the example of Arizona, where if I'm shipping to another city in Arizona, even though my ship from destination or location is defined, I've still got a file in some of those other remote cities. If I'm doing business there, there's kind of a nexus test that goes on within those locations. So, so that's that environment. Most states are destination-based. All those that adhere to the rulings of the Streamlined Sales Tax Organization, which is a voluntary group of at least 23 or 24 states now, and there's other states that aren't official members of SST but still comply with those approaches. And those all follow a destination-based approach. So when I ship to a location outside of my own, I need to calculate tax based on that ship-to location. So now it becomes very complex to keep track of all those rates and the changes of those rates in all these different jurisdictions. There's literally thousands of them around. And then just for extra fun, we've got the mixed source states that are kind of a mixture of both, California and Texas being prominent examples of those, where the county is origin-based. In the case of Texas, cities and counties are origin-based, but specialty tax jurisdictions, things like rapid transit districts and football stadium districts and things like that, and in California, actual cities, can be destination-based. And then depending on what services are now being taxed, as those rules change, services typically are always destination-based, where I deliver the service, provide the service, is the jurisdiction that I'm now liable to collect and remit for. So it becomes a very complex environment, and trying to manage that as you grow and as you try to understand the rules. And if you read the the publications and the websites for the states, and if you can interpret the legalese, you're a better person than I am. The other challenge that occurs is the taxability relative to the products and services that you sell. And there are certain industries that have particular challenges in this environment. So in other words, the same product or SKU that you sell in one location may be treated as non-taxable, and in another location is taxable. Software, hardware, digital goods, as I just referenced, certain services, medical equipment and supplies is a big one. Food and beverage is a big one. Clothing and apparel is a big one. So if those are industries or markets that you work in and operate in, you have some complexities that go beyond just the nexus and the destination ship-to stuff. It is this product taxable or at different rates or in different thresholds and so forth. So that's really something you've got to take a look at if you're in those industries in particular. And the typical method today, the manual approach is I build tables within my ERP application, and those tables are typically at best zip code based, maybe zip +4. You can actually buy tables that you can import into your application that would support zip +4 boundaries. And you may think that that's giving you an accurate tax calculation, but I have bad news for you if you do. The fact is that zip code boundaries really don't relate at all to sales tax jurisdictional boundaries. They probably were a closer match a few years ago, but with the rapid growth of specialty tax districts, that's just not true anymore. But even with city boundaries and so forth, if we zero in here to an area southwest of Denver, we see Englewood, Colorado, and Greenwood Village and so forth. These different color-coded boundaries represent taxing jurisdictions, and you can see the different variance in the rates there. Pretty dramatic rate differences, 4.35 to 7.85 in a spread there. And if we just zero in on 80111, if you had a table that had that zip code with a tax rate, how would you ever get it right? I mean, you got, of course, Colorado State, but 2 different counties, 3 different cities, plus 3 different specialty tax jurisdictions for the football stadium and rapid transit and so forth. So, so to have a calculation based on a zip code is just plain risky, because the odds are very high that it's going to be inaccurate. And again, when the auditor comes knocking, that's a challenge, and it can be expensive. So that's kind of the broad scheme of things. If we think about it in terms of your own internal processes, it's another perspective on how challenging this is. And if you think about it in terms of just the different steps in compliance, first of all, the tax calculation. If I'm going to calculate an accurate tax, I've got to have the customer address. I've got to know their ship to, ship from. I've got to understand those rules. Do I have a business presence or a nexus in that location? I've got to, if I already have a tax table, then I apply that to that customer. It may be a new location that I've got to create now, a new tax code and Schedule 4. Got to define the rules and make sure I understand all those things, make sure my products are classified correctly for those jurisdictions, and then kind of rinse and repeat over and over every time a customer gets me a new address, changes, I add a new customer. We kind of go through that compliance process over and over. Pretty challenging. From a standpoint of exemption certificates, if you're dealing with customers that are exempt from sales tax, I think I mentioned this is an area of big focus for auditors these days. So you better have a process that's in place that works and that's accurate, and it can be very challenging to do. And there's two real impacts internally. One is it can be a very poor customer experience. You sometimes will have to actually suspend the sales processes while you shuffle paper, ask them to fax you the right paperwork. It may not be the right one. It may not be filled out. It might not be signed. You got to send it back and forth. That whole process can be very painful and can be very inconvenient for your customers. Or you may just go ahead and charge sales tax, and then they short pay the invoice and send you the certificate later. And now your accounting people have to get involved and issue credit memos and all those kinds of things, and then reissue invoices, et cetera. So very painful process managing exempt customers. And then the third piece of the process is the actual filing and remitting. So if you think about what does that look like in your organization, and most companies we talk to, it tends to be a scramble to the 20th of the month to get all the information compiled, reconciled, get the right forms, checks cut, that kind of thing, in the mail, postmarked by the appointed date, to make sure you're not also getting not beyond the liabilities, late filing fees. So it can be a very challenging internal process just to get the forms filed and remitted, and then there's typically notices that come out after that. The jurisdiction wants some additional detail information. Now you've got to go back and dig into the records again. So if you think about those internal processes, you spend a lot of time and money today trying to stay in compliance through the manual environment. And we would suggest to you that there's a better way to do that. So to summarize, sales tax is a statutory requirement. You've got to do it. You have no choice. Audit activity is way up. The average audit is $34,000, so it's very expensive. It's full of risk and exposure, and it's a very painful manual process. It's labor intensive, tends to be error prone, and it's therefore expensive if you think about it in terms of your labor rates, your burden rates, and who's all involved, and not to mention just quality of life issues, the stress and concern and sleepless nights. Am I doing that right? Am I at risk or not? And all that is, again, 100% non-revenue generating. It adds no value to the business, doesn't help you serve your customers, doesn't turn inventory, doesn't impact any of those key performance indicators that you have in your organization, in your business, that affect profitability. And it's got to be accurate. So our assertion would be that the least amount of time and effort and money that you can spend on this activity, the better, and that you focus your time and energy on things that really do add value to the business. So what are some choices out there that we see companies looking at for how to manage this process? And we can kind of put it in a quadrant of risk and cost and look at where we fall there. So a high cost but low risk environment is one where you just spend all kinds of time and effort, maybe even have a dedicated full-time employee, or maybe half their time just focused on nothing but researching state websites, making phone calls, analyzing your environment, updating things, and doing real-time adjustments and changes on a per-transaction basis, putting in all kinds of processes and procedures in place for your order entry folks or your sales teams to try to get it right. So you can be very diligent about it, and it will lower your risk as a result, but that's a very costly, wasteful process to do it that way. The other opposite approach, I guess, is just kind of put your head in the sand and forget about it. You're just going to hiding from reality. You're not going to do research. You're going to do the best you can with these broad-based, zip code-based tables, and just not worry about it much, and know that you're not in compliance, and just kind of hope that the auditor doesn't come knocking. So low cost, but it's very high risk, because the auditors will come knocking. And then where you want to be, of course, is in the upper right quadrant, low risk, low cost. And we would assert that that's where AvaTax and the Avalara solutions really come into play. Let's automate this process. Let's streamline the process, outsource the process, let the experts do it, that this is what we do all day, every day, do it very cost effectively, and now you don't have to worry about it again. You can turn your attention to the important things in your business. And so what it really amounts to is, we sometimes like to joke, it's about hiring the perfect employee, right? The super employee, a guy that never sleeps, never takes a vacation. He's always 100% accurate. She has incredible tax expertise and really cheap, right? She works for $99 a month or so, and that would be the ideal employee. And in fact, that's kind of what we're presenting here with the Avalara and the AvaTax solutions, that we can be that perfect employee for you. So what we really tried to do is put together a solution that says, let's seamlessly integrate our tax calculation engines and our compliance services right into the Sage applications that you're working with every day, right into your current flow of tasks where there's no additional training required, give you that full compliance. We're going to look at what we call address validation, or specific rooftop addresses for the transaction, the ship from and the ship to. And based on that, we're going to know exactly what all the jurisdictions are that apply, what all the rules and rates are that apply to those jurisdictions, and then factor in, the Nexus footprint and exemptions and all those kinds of things, and give you an accurate tax calculation immediately, and know that it's always right. And we'll manage those 11,000 plus unique tax jurisdictions across North America. We understand those 100,000 plus taxability rules that exist across North America. Yes, those are real numbers, 11,000 jurisdictions and 100,000 rules. And again, we'll reduce that risk of that negative audit result. And so our approach is just different. What we've decided to do when we built the company and built these applications some 8-9 years ago was to say, let's leverage technology and expertise and industry knowledge that's out there, put that all in one place and make that available to our customers on a real-time, on-demand, as-needed type basis. And let's integrate that application, that access to that technology and all that expertise from all kinds of environments where you may be transacting business. Clearly from a standard accounting application like the Sage 100 or Sage 300 or 500, those kinds of ERP or accounting applications, but also at points of sale environments, at e-commerce shopping cart applications, CRM applications, maybe custom front-end applications where you're taking orders and processing things right at the point of sale, dealing with the customer. Let's integrate that great tax calculation engine and functionality and all that knowledge and expertise right where it happens, and that's what we've done. So we've built those tight integrations into all those environments, really leveraging all the technology that's available to us, and provided a very certified, streamlined process that is 100% accurate. So the way we do that is with kind of an end-to-end compliance approach. First and foremost, it all starts with an accurate calculation. In the Sage world, what we normally call AvaTax, it's actually branded Sage Sales Tax. It's OEM'd by Sage. We've had a very long, successful relationship with Sage. I think the Mass 90 product, as it was known then, was one of the first two accounting applications that we ever integrated with. So we've got a very long, successful history, and several years ago, Sage actually endorsed us to the level where they actually put us on their price list. We're now branded and OEM'd by Sage as Sage Sales Tax. And in that environment, we're going to do that address validation, assign the right jurisdictions and all the rules, and calculate an accurate tax, and then give you great reporting on the back end as well. Some of you may be familiar with accounting applications tend not to be the greatest reporting tools for sales tax, especially with all the granularity that's now required. The second piece of the puzzle for us is that exemption certificate management environment. The product we call AvaTax Certs, or sometimes we shorthand it to the word AvaCert. It initiates that initial certificate request from your customer. It launches them into a collection wizard. It collects the data. Very clean, streamlined, easy process for your customers. You automatically get alerted to that whole flow. You can store it and retrieve it in a matter of a couple of keystrokes, and can be integrated again with the application on the accounting side or on our side on the back end. Manages renewals and expiration dates, which some states have exemption certificates and different types of certificates for different industries that will expire at different times. We absolutely nail that compliance requirement down. And then the third piece is that returns process, right? We give you a great liability worksheet format that helps you prepare the returns yourself, or if you'd like us to outsource that and process those returns, remit the taxes, we do that very easily, again, with a very clean, easy workflow. What might take you 2.5 weeks today could take you at the most a couple of days to get all of your returns reconciled and submitted and remitted, and then you get a return archive, see exactly what we did on your behalf. We handle all the follow-up notices that may come from jurisdictions, so we take care of that whole notice management component as well. So we really do have an end-to-end compliance, and the benefits are what you see here. I mean, it's really all about saving time. You don't ever have to research rates or build or maintain those tax tables any longer. It's about accuracy. We're going to, again, use that address and geolocation validation stuff, very high-tech stuff, but it all happens in the background. You don't have to worry about it. We're going to get it right. We're therefore going to mitigate the risk. We're going to give you all the detailed and reporting and audit trail and everything that you need to cleanly get through audit processes. In fact, it's not uncommon for auditors to walk in and see that you have Avalara in the automated environment. They're going to turn back around after a very cursory review, if that, because they're looking for low-hanging fruit. They're going to go knock on your neighbor's door who hasn't automated, and they're going to find money for the state. And by the way, they're incentivized in their comp plans to find that money. So they're just not going to spend much time with you if you've made this kind of investment. And that's another real nice return on investment for you. You're going to certainly gain efficiency. It's much easier and quicker, faster, streamlined process for you, where you can now focus your energy and time on things that really do help your business grow, help it be more profitable, help you serve your customers, and so forth. So that's really what we're talking about here is automation, and those are the benefits of that automation. So this is what it would look like in a Sage 100, as it's now branded, formerly Mass 90, Mass 200. This is what the customer screen would look like. A couple of quick things to point out here. You'll notice a new Avalara icon here next to the address. So as I mentioned, when we do a tax calculation, we're going to validate addresses to make sure we get it right. But we also have kind of an ad hoc functionality here within the customer record that if you just change this customer or added a new customer, right from here you could go ahead and validate the address, maybe even while you have the customer still on the phone, to make sure that you've got it in there correctly and that this is correct, makes sense, and is valid. And by the way, that also cleans up your data for purposes of shipping. We've had some feedback from folks that their shipping costs have actually been reduced somewhat because of a cleaner address database. The other thing you'll notice here is the word AvaTax as your tax schedule. And this is what triggers the logic within the Sage application to say, don't look at an internal table. Instead, just go out to the Avalara data centers, take along the data that applies, the ship to information, whatever that might be, where we also have these validation functionality, and the AvaTax tax schedules exist throughout the application. And then when you're entering the order, it doesn't change your flow. You enter your lines, you get to the total screen, and we calculate the tax in the background at sub-second response times. Just happens in the blink of an eye. And now if you expand that tax detail button, you'll see that we now add specialty tax districts, and we give you a little bit extra breakout here right within the mass application. In addition to that, the data flows to the back-end administrative console for Avalara. And so you will be assigned your own secured login and password, of course, very secure environment, and get to a customer portal or a dashboard type of environment where you can now access that data, manage it, manage your configurations. If you added a new state where you now have declared Nexus, you simply go into the organization tab, click a couple of buttons, and you're done. And now this becomes your portal, your point of access for all that data. And so here's an example of a transaction that flowed into our back end as a result of a Sage ERP calculation. And you can see the level of granular detail here where we explode by the line, and then within each line, all the tax calculation that happened. And you can see, again, in this example, the state of Colorado, the county of Adams, city of Commerce, and then the 3 different jurisdictional specialty tax jurisdictions here with the breakout of what the tax rates were applied against the taxable amount, total tax, rolls up to the line, all the lines roll up to the invoice. Again, great granular detailed information that's available in a drill down type of environment like this, or of course in all the reporting tools that we have available to you as well. So that's what it looks like on the back end. Not a whole lot to see here, right, because it just all happens kind of under the desk, under the table, but it works and flows beautifully. And all that's great. I mean, I think it's wonderful that that the integration is so clean and easy to use and so forth. But really, I think the real core issue for a lot of our customers is what's that process and experience going to look like when I go up on the service and when I go live. And we've focused a lot of time and energy in the last couple of years, especially at Avalara, to make that as automated and as simple and clean and streamlined a process as possible. And one of the keys to this is that when you sign a contract with us and move forward, we assign to you a specific go-live coordinator, an individual whose name and phone number you have and email you have, and that person facilitates the process for you, walks you through the whole routine. If you need help with any technical support or compliance folks, they facilitate that. They get you signed up for the right training classes based on your needs. They create the schedule for the go-live. So we really work hard to create a very strong experience for you. And the reason that companies do this is the same reason they outsource payroll in the past, right? Many companies have used Paychex and ADP and similar firms in the past, and it's because it was a costly and error-prone process. It had audits and bad, inaccurate information, created all kinds of fines and penalties and interest, and added no value again to the business. So for the same reason you might outsource payroll, you can now take a look at sales tax outsourcing as the same kind of concept. And actually, the reality is that sales tax is more complex than payroll because payroll doesn't tend to move around so much. We've got a lot of customers that we've worked with that have been very happy to provide their testimony to how easy the process was, how much they enjoy working with us, how much better their life is now, and how much they feel better about the reduced exposure and risk in their organization. Those were clips of videos that are out on our website that you might want to take a look at. We've really done a yeoman's job over the last 8 years of impacting the way this is done. We've really revolutionized this marketplace. We're now, actually this slide's probably a little outdated. I think we're well over 10,000 companies now that are using us. We're doing, billions of sales tax calculations annually. 500,000 tax returns per year. Last year we did over $10 billion in remittances on behalf of our customers. So one of the impacts of this is not only are we really good at it with all that practice, right? We do a lot of this. It's all we do. We're focused on it 100%. So there's that advantage. But also all the state departments of revenue, Board of Equalization, whatever they're called in your state, they know who we are. They respect what we do. They know that we are a good organization that does a great job, that we're accurate. And so that's a nice benefit to you as well. The last statistic, there were over 1.5 million exemption certificates now on file in our systems. And we've been a founding member of that SST project, the Streamline Sales Tax. We're in the industry. We're a big part of it. We're well known, recognized. And I think that adds value for you as well. And the last couple of points before we open it up for some Q&A or see if we've got some in the dialogue boxes here. Let's think just real quickly who we can help. So certainly if you've seen yourself in some of these scenarios that we've been painting, we'd love to have a further conversation with you. If you've got Nexus in multiple states and multiple jurisdictions, each state you add, the complexity gets exponentially worse, right? So if that's you, this makes perfect sense to pursue further. Or even if you're in only one state, but it's a complicated state, California being a prime example, Colorado is another tough one, Arizona with its home rule environment can be a tough one, state of Washington is a tough one. So if you're in any of those in the western U.S. In particular, even if you're only in that one state, you may have enough pain to warrant taking a closer look at this automation solution. We talked about some of the industries and product types that were at higher risk for all those taxability rules. If you have high volume of activity, that can be more challenging just to manage it through the volumes that you're dealing with. Unfortunately, some of our best prospects that we talk to are those that are going through an audit or just recently been audited. That pain is very fresh, and they're happy to talk to us and see that they don't ever have to go through that again. And if you're just simply kind of changing your environment, we talk to a lot of distribution companies that have historically not had to deal with sales tax because their customers are all exempt, selling to resellers, but now they're starting to branch into other channels of distribution, if you will. They're doing some online things for the first time, and now they're expanding their reach as a result geographically. And now for the first time, maybe they're looking at this environment and going, holy cow, this is a nightmare. What am I going to do about managing this? to take advantage of those new business opportunities. And we have great conversations with those folks. We certainly won lots of awards and recognition over the years. I think a key one for many businesses is this third from the bottom is the SSAE 16 certification. We go through an annual audit every year that makes sure that we're in compliance with all the best practices and industry standards in terms of not only just the technical security and encryption and backup systems and data center stuff, all that technical stuff that's world class, but also our training and our processes and our people and the flow of information that we have. All that is audited by outside firms on an annual basis. So we have that SSAE 16 certification. That's critical if any of you are following Sarbanes-Oxley rules, whether you're publicly traded or not. That's a real critical component. So we're real proud of that, as well as, of course, all the other kind of industry recognition. We would recommend highly that you go to our website at avalara.com. There's a resources page there, and there are all kinds of demos and videos, product customer testimonials. This screen is referencing the specific demo for the Sage Mass 9200 product. It takes about 5, 6, 7 minutes typically for most of these, and it would give you a real good idea for how that all flows and works that we just don't have time for here today. So I recommend that. Also wanted to mention to you that a relatively new service for us in the last couple of years is our 1099 solution. And this is the time of year now where many of you are starting to think about getting prepared for 1099 season in the January, February time frame. If you're handling hundreds or even thousands of 1099s every year, we can really streamline that process very cost effectively. We just pretty much take care of the whole thing. It's got the taxpayer ID validation, so the numbers are right. You don't get all the notices after you've done the mailing. Just a great application. So if that's a pain point in your organization, you might want to talk to us about that as well. So with that, I'm done. We'll